What's up, everybody? We're going to keep going on this Mysteries of Ancient South America, Harold T. Wilkins. And, I got to say, there's a few things in here that make me suspect, just being hypercritical about things. But then there's other things that make me think, well, he's on to something if he actually knew about that at that time. In the last video, we talked about a supposed 17th century Portuguese manuscript that claims to have found what he calls an Atlantean civilization in the Amazon. It was an ancient stone city too advanced to have been built by indigenous natives. Aside from that, though, they say that about a 300-mile stretch of the Amazon was pretty much continuously populated by tribes that did live in grass huts. Officially, there were never supposed to have been that many people living there, but they're finally getting around to doing LIDAR down there and finding all kinds of settlements. A study published last year reported the discovery of 24 ancient constructions hidden. The previously unknown earthworks include the remains of a town, fortified villages, defensive and ceremonial structures known as geoglyphs, and riverbank sites on floodplains that may have been used to gather aquatic food. Now, geoglyphs are things like the Nazca lines, which these you wouldn't even notice if you were on the ground. They're only visible from the air. Or like Serpent Mound, which again isn't very impressive from ground level. They didn't give any details about the geoglyphs, but they found something. I'm going to show you something that in my mind gives this author a little more credibility, because he was writing this between, there's one date in here, 1925, and the other is 1945. So it sounds like he started in 25, released the book in 45. And he mentioned something very specific that got my attention. Just so you know, we're looking at images of Central America, and there's not supposed to have been anyone this advanced down around the Amazon. Wilkins writes, on March 23, 1773, the archives of the governor of the southern Brazilian province of Sao Paulo record another accidental discovery of a dead Brazilian city of unknown age. The commandant of Fort Iguatemi reported to the governor that a fisherman jumped ashore on a sandbank and found a curiously shaped stone of large diameter. He said it was like a grindstone or a mill wheel. Nearby were the ruins of a house and an ancient stone wall. The commandant of the fort sent out a garrison who found vestiges of a city. Quote, "This ancient city is regularly laid out and is of large size. It had a street that is half a league long, which is about a mile and a half. The city stood on the banks of two rivers and had a walled suburb. Moats stood between the city and the suburb. We unearthed two more of the strange mill wheels while we were making a stockade. All round are dense forests. The old men of the countryside have traditions that a city stood on this spot, which was called Guayara." Okay, so a mill wheel is a giant stone wheel that they used to use for grinding down wheat into flour. So when he described finding stones like mill wheels, the first thing I thought of was the coil shockway stone. This is from the Aztecs in Mexico, but every aspect of this is pretty crazy here. Now, let me show you this picture for scale. This thing is huge. And this is why it's so crazy that he mentioned something this specific. This was discovered in 1978, and he's writing that book back in 1945. So let's set the Amazon on the side burner for a minute, and I want to go up and talk about the Aztecs and this coil shockway stone, the moonstone. Coil shockway is the moon goddess to the Aztecs, and you might notice that her limbs and head aren't attached to the torso. Now, if you're new to talking ancient history with me, better get used to the fact that everything is describing ancient catastrophism. That's what most of the old mythology is. This is the Aztec moon goddess, all mangled and dismembered, so what could that mean? Why would the moon be portrayed as falling to pieces? Well, according to Aztec mythology, Coil Shockway, whose name in Nahuatl means the one adorned with bells. So you look at the moon, you see all the little bells. She was the leader of her 400 brothers, the Huts-Nahua, who represented the stars of the southern sky. Coilshakwe is the daughter of Coatlicue, the goddess of the earth and fertility. So the moon is the daughter of the earth, is what they're saying there. The myth goes like this. One night, Coatlicue was sweeping a small hut on top of the sacred mountain Coatepec, when suddenly a bundle of beautiful feathers descended from the heavens and landed in front of her. Now, there's all kinds of old artwork out there portraying comets as feathers. So you're seeing all of these feathers falling from the heavens, from the skies. Slowly, she picked them up and put them to her heart. Miraculously, the feather disappeared into her bosom and impregnated her with a son. So these feathers drove deep into the earth. This son in time would be Huitzilopochtli, the warrior god. Upon learning of her mother's condition, Coilshakwe could not bear the shame and dishonor of Coatlicue's pregnancy. So she conspired with her 400 brothers to kill their mother. So that's the moon and the 400 southern stars going after the earth. When Coilshakwe and her 400 brothers finally reached the top of the sacred mountain Coatepec to end their mother's life, Coatlicue gave birth to Huitzilopochtli, who was born a fully armed warrior. The warrior god immediately rushed to where his sister was, and with his mighty weapon, translates as fire serpent, which was actually a ray of the sun, swiftly butchered his unruly siblings. Chopping up Coilshakwe into several large chunks, he tossed the pieces down the mountainside. The head of the goddess was tossed into the sky, and it became the moon, and his brothers the stars of the firmament. Now, to me, it sounds like a pretty clear telling of a cosmic disaster, but according to scholars, Coilshakwe's demise at the hands of Huitzilopochtli is said to symbolize the daily victory of the sun over the moon and stars. To me, it sounds like they're saying the moon is the daughter of the earth and her head was thrown up into the sky during some cosmic incident. The other crazy thing here is where this Coilshakwe stone was discovered. Here they are in 1978, freshly unearthed, and they are right smack dab middle of Mexico City. And then it keeps getting stranger from there, because the stone used to preside at the base of a pyramid that we'll get to in a minute in the city of Tenochtitlan. This entire city was built on an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, and they had a really sophisticated network of dams set up to control the lake levels. Now, when the Spanish had arrived, they were absolutely blown away by this city. For one, it was clean when all the cities in Europe were nasty, but they actually did have trash services, marketplaces, a zoo, and I'm not even kidding. From what I've read, two of the favorite things the Aztecs did were mushrooms and poetry. Now, they had a ruling class that was Saturnic, like every other ruling class, but the average person out there liked tripping and making pretty headdresses. I remember one of the Jesuit priests writing one day, "I drank mushroom wine and my heart weeps." Now, if you've ever had a good solid trip, then you know exactly what he means by that. The other crazy thing about the Coilshakwe stone is it was supposed to have resided at the base of the Templo de Mayor, this double-purposed pyramid with one temple at the top dedicated to the sun, another one dedicated to the moon. But this huge stone sat at the base of this pyramid, and then in 1978, they discovered this stone right in the center of downtown Mexico City. So the ancient city of Tenochtitlan is below modern-day Mexico City, and they had no clue it was there. How does that happen? Officially, they say the Spanish dismantled this unchristian pagan temple stone by stone. Their story of the conquest of the Aztecs is already straining credibility, but you're telling me after 400 guys whooped up on a few million native Aztecs, they then started dismantling huge pyramids in the name of God? I don't think so. So anyway, all of this came to mind when I was reading this book that was written in 1945, 30 years before the Coil Shockwave Stone had been discovered, and he's describing these giant mill wheels down in the Amazon rainforest. And we have the testimony of this commandant saying that the locals say this was an ancient city that they call Guayara. And the soldiers also speak of these bearded white Indians in the area, not albinos, they specifically say. And this was 1753. There's also reports of these white bearded Indians as recent as 1932. A Jesuit missionary, Father Lucero, reported meeting white Indians on the banks of the Rio Helguera in 1932, but found he could not approach the strange white Indians. They were shy, timid, and furtive, and met the forest Indians at the edge of a lake deep in the forest, where they would barter. Lucero called them the Cueveros, and said they had for a king a descendant of the Inca Tupac Amaru, who, with 40,000 Inca Peruvians, fled far away eastwards of Cusco through the unexplored woods away from the cruel Spanish conquistadors. He also identified them with the other mysterious white race of El Gran Patiti, who were ruled by a tiger king in a, quote, white house by the lake. Tupac took with him a rich treasure which two rival bands of banditti got wind of and decided to pursue. The bands met and fought to the death in the forests, the survivors being finished off by the savage Chuncho Indians. Lucero says he himself had seen plates, half moons, and earrings of gold brought from this mysterious nation. Now, I have heard about small pockets of Inca that fled after the Spanish arrival that actually lived out there for quite a while, but he's claiming a rather large number, 40,000 of them, left the highlands of Peru and braved out into the jungle. But nobody's ever considered the Inca white, so I don't know where that connection comes from. That thinking comes from Father Lucero, where the author of the book is attributing that to the ancient Atlanteans. Honestly, I don't care what color they were, and that's a modern thing to think that white cultures are traditionally more advanced than others. The Spanish were absolutely blown away with what they found with the Aztecs and the Inca, and Europeans may have had a more advanced technology in sailing and muskets and armor, but from what I've read, the social order in the Americas, as far as actually taking care of your civilians, maintaining law and order, having a safe place to raise your kids, seemed much better in American cities than European. You had big stone cities of the Aztecs up here, the Inca down here, and nowadays the Amazon is almost uninhabitably thick jungle, but who knows what it was like there a couple thousand years ago. Officially, they say that the Americas were very densely populated until the Spanish came, and then diseases started wiping everybody out, up to 90%. I think conservative estimates say that 55 million perished. And nowadays, they've propageed this and told everybody that it was a European genocide of the Native Americans, as if people like the Puritans fleeing persecution in Europe just showed up with swords and started chopping away. There were only a handful of battles in the Indian Wars, and the Native Americans were lucky to be able to muster 2,000 fighting-age men. So you can pretty well forget anything your left-wing indoctrinated history teacher told you about this, and I'm not even so sure about smallpox and whatnot wiping out that much of a population. It's never had a 90% fatality rate anywhere else in the world for any other culture. What I kind of think is the catastrophes of the 1300s, which I haven't covered too much of on this channel, had already wiped out the majority of the population, and when Europeans came over, they were doing reconnaissance, not discovery. So it's entirely possible that the gold-digging Spaniards came over and saw a whole land of easy pickings and told the rest of the world, no, they have big, huge, powerful kingdoms over there, don't even bother showing up. When in reality, in America, they were trying to put their lives back together. According to the Aztecs themselves, they said that they had just built Tenochtitlan 200 years prior to the Spanish arrival, which puts that right at the 1300s catastrophes. And I'll have to get some videos up over here about what happened at that time. A couple of quick examples is the Mississippian culture in Central America, Central United States disappeared. The Anasazi disappeared out west. And the latest scientific developments say that there was a drastic change in climatic conditions around that time. Just happens to be the same time that the Aztecs were fleeing from the north, came down south, and founded Tenochtitlan. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you made it this far, check and see if you're subscribed, hit the like button, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Static out.